Welcome to the World Today on Channels Television. I am Amarachi Ubani. Chechnya has denied sending troops to Ukraine to fight alongside pro-Russia separatists. The Republic's Moscow-backed leader, Ramzan Kadyrov, said in a statement that as part of the Russian Federation, Chechnya has no armed forces and that any Chechens operating in Ukraine were there in a personal capacity. On Monday, some of the worst of fighting was witnessed since the rebels seized much of the eastern part of the country. The separatists say that they lost up to 100 fighters as they tried to seize Donetsk airport from pro-Kiev forces. Ukraine's Interior Ministry says the military is now in full control of that airport, although gunfire was reportedly heard in Donetsk itself today. Now, the Pakistani Taliban has divided following a walkout by the major Massoud faction over what they describe as the un-Islamic tactics by the group's leaders. It is the first time we've witnessed a major rift in the Pakistani Taliban ranks since 2007, when the umbrella group was first formed. Analysts say the split may help advance peace talks with the government, though. Tens of thousands of people have died in militant attacks in Pakistan in the last 7 years. Most of the deaths have been caused by the Taliban itself. A rift in the group comes after over a month of infighting in which dozens of fighters from the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan were killed. A powerful faction comprising militants from the Massoud tribe, that's the core around which regional militant groups initially gravitated to form. The TTP said it was forming its own separate group called the Tehreek-Taliban South Waziristan. A pregnant Pakistani woman, though, has been killed by her relatives just outside the court in Lahore. She was killed for marrying against their wishes. Police said a 30-year-old Farzan Abibi died on the spot after being attacked with bricks and stones. Her father handed himself in, but police say her brothers and former fiancé, who also took part in the attack, are still free. Analysts say hundreds of girls and women in Pakistan are killed every year by family members. However, many more killings are believed to go unreported. Farzana Bibi's parents accused her husband, Muhammad Iqbal, of kidnapping her and had filed a case against him at the High Court. However, she testified to the police that she had married him of her own accord. Police said the couple had been engaged for a number of years. Just as she arrived at the court building for a hearing, police said about a dozen family members pulled her aside and began to attack her and her husband, who managed to escape. We're staying with courts now, but this time in Asia. Courts in China has found 55 people in the restive region of Xinjiang guilty of terrorism, separatism, and murder. The defendants, who appear to be from the region's ethnic Muslim Uyghur minority, were presented to a stadium holding about 7,000 spectators. 3 of the prisoners were given the death sentence. Chinese officials have blamed militant Uyghur groups for a growing number of violent attacks across the country. A mass trial follows a similar event last week in the region where 39 people were sentenced to jail on terrorism charges. Well, people in Thailand can now breathe easier, especially those whose family members were abducted or arrested by the police earlier in the week. The police have finally released 124 people, including politicians and activists who were taken into custody after the coup was announced last week. An army spokesperson said a total of 253 people had been summoned, 53 did not report, and 76 were in custody. Analysts say conditions for the release appear to include agreeing to avoid political activity and informing the army of travel. The military seized power on May 22nd, saying it wanted to return stability to the country after months of unrest.
Thai protest leaders presented themselves to the police on Wednesday for questioning as the military consolidated its grip on the country, appointing advisors with palace ties who are hostile towards former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra. Buddhist monk and protest leader Luang Buddha Isara was one of the first to appear at the Department of Special Investigations this morning.
เราถือว่าเราทำสิ่งที่ถูกต้องแล้ว
I believe we have done the right thing. We did not threaten to assault or kill anyone. We did not destroy the governmental buildings, did not lock down the government buildings. They were closed before we arrived. NPOC sent a letter to us, citing security threats, but we have clear evidence. Earlier in the week, Buddha Isara, along with the leader of the People's Democratic Reforms Committee, PDRC, were freed from military detention on bail after acknowledging sedition charges. Thai coup leader General Prayut Chan-o-cha received a formal royal endorsement to be the head of the military council, which will lead the country. Key political figures have been detained or have been turning themselves in after being summoned for talks by the military. The military is losing its grip on the ordinary people's lives, relaxing the 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. curfew to midnight to 4 a.m. starting from Wednesday. Gatherings of more than 5 people are still banned under a military edict, but groups of anti-coup protesters have been holding demonstrations under the watchful eye of armed soldiers.
Let's check in on the updates in the South Korean ferry disaster. Just a month after about 300 people died in the country, it's been hit by yet another tragedy. At least 20 patients and a nurse have been killed in a fire at a hospice in Yangseong County. 6 others are in critical condition after the inferno at Hyoserang Hospital, about 300 kilometers south of Seoul, caught fire. Most of those who died are thought to have been in their 70s and 80s and were probably confined to their beds. Officials said most of the people who died suffocated because of toxic fumes. A fire was put out within half an hour.
A midnight blaze ripped through this hospital in a rural area of southwestern Korea. The fire in Janseong County was put out relatively quickly, and rescue workers moved speedily to treat the victim of the fire. Still, at least 21 patients and a nurse were killed. Most of the victims were elderly patients confined to their beds. All the victims were bedridden patients who were unable to escape by themselves. So despite the hospital's initial rescue efforts, many people were sacrificed. All of the victims were on the second floor of our building, and most of them suffered from smoke inhalation. An 81-year-old man is in police custody. He's being questioned on suspicion of arson after he was seen on surveillance camera walking into an empty room where the fire is believed to have started. The man has been identified as a patient at the hospital and is suffering from dementia. The latest disaster comes at the time of mourning for South Korea after more than 300 people died in a ferry sinking last month. It also comes a day after a fire killed 7 people at a bus terminal. Right now, the country faces criticism that regulatory controls and safety standards have not kept pace with the rapid development in manufacturing and technology.
Well, it is election time in Syria, and refugees in Lebanon and Jordan have been given the opportunity to participate in the next general elections. And they now have the chance to vote early in the presidential elections, which is due to be held next week. The main polling stations open at the Syrian embassies in Beirut and in Amman today. The UN says 2.8 million Syrian refugees have fled to neighboring countries. President Bashar al-Assad is widely expected, surprisingly, to win a third 7-year term in office in the elections which hold on the 3rd of June. Although international communities have described the elections as a farce. More than 160,000 people have died since the uprising against the president began in March 2011. French police in the northern city of Calais in France are evacuating about 800 migrants from Asia, the Middle East and Africa who have been occupying camps near the port. Authorities say the evictions are needed to deal with an outbreak of scabies in the camps where the number has risen in recent months. Migrants have been trying to get into Britain. They say they were stuck in France and have nowhere else to go after the camps were destroyed. Police moved into the site after a deadline for people to leave expired.
French riot police started evacuating 3 campsites housing hundreds of immigrants in the northern port town of Calais on Wednesday, days after the anti-immigrant National Front Party hammered the ruling socialists in the European election. The evictions, denounced by local rights organizations, had been announced by a local government prefect a week earlier, before Sunday's election drubbing, on the grounds that makeshift camps posed problems for public health and safety. Calais has for years attracted floods of immigrants who flee poverty or conflict in countries such as Afghanistan and Iraq, many of them hoping to cross the narrow sea channel to Britain by ferry or the subsea train tunnel. Many of the estimated 600 to 800 immigrants living in the 3 camps had moved out before the well-publicized evacuation ordered by Dennis Robin, prefect for the Pas-de-Calais region. The operation came on the heels of the European Parliament elections, where the National Front, or FN, took 1 in 4 votes to come first ahead of the mainstream centre-right opposition party, and in 3rd place, the ruling Socialist Party. Pas-de-Calais lies in northwest France, where the FN won 34% of the vote in Sunday's election, one of its best tallies, and a tripling of its score from the 2009 EU election. The FN has long campaigned for a dramatic reduction in immigration and opposes the Schengen borderless zone at the heart of the 28-member European Union.
When we come back after the break, our focus on Africa. The situation in Libya worsens, and the United States urges its citizens to get out while they can. Please join us again. Welcome back to the world today. The literary world has lost an icon. One of America's leading voices, Maya Angelou, has died at the age of 86. The poet, author, and activist made her name with the 1969 memoir, I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings. It was the first of 7 volumes of autobiography that traced her life from a childhood of abuse and oppression in the Deep South in the 1930s. In a statement on Facebook, her family said, and I'm quoting here, she lived a life as a teacher, an activist, artist, and human being. She was a warrior for equality, tolerance, and peace. They added that she passed away quietly at home in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. As they've been from Wake Forest University, where Angelou had been a professor of American Studies since 1982, said Dr. Angelou was a national treasure whose life and teachings inspired millions around the world. Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling and civil rights campaigner Reverend Jesse Jackson also paid tribute to the literary icon.